Hi, you're watching Reddit Confessions. She texted me at exactly 9:46 p.m. The timestamp burned into my memory because I was staring at a takeout bag cooling on the counter. Untouched. Like me. Her message read, "I have my own life. And it doesn't always include you." I didn't even get to open the soy sauce. The timing wasn't random. She knew I'd be home. She knew I'd be waiting. Like every other Thursday when she went to yoga. Except that night, she didn't bother to lie. She chose to be cruel, deliberately, decisively cruel. I didn't call. I didn't text back immediately. Instead, I walked into our shared closet, took down my suitcase, and started folding shirts with the precision of a man assembling a crime scene. No music, no rage, just silence. The kind you only hear before something breaks. Then I replied, "From now on, it doesn't include me at all." One sentence. 16 words. And I meant every syllable. At 10:12 p.m., she called. I let it ring. 10:14. Again. 10:16. 4 messages. "Alden? What are you talking about? Are you serious right now? You're being manipulative." I smiled. Manipulative? I hadn't even raised my voice. I'd been silent for months, while she erased me one girl's night at a time. By 11:30 p.m., she was outside the apartment, banging on the door, crying. I watched through the peephole, wondering if she'd bring him with her this time, the man I only knew by a name in her Venmo history. But she was alone. And this time, I wasn't opening the door. The banging on the door didn't stop for nearly 20 minutes. I didn't move. I just sat on the edge of the couch, suitcase beside me, staring at the digital clock on the microwave. 11:49 p.m. I remember the glow. I remember the silence between knocks. And I remember wondering how many other men had watched her cry and assumed it meant she cared. Because I knew better now. She only cried when she lost control. I waited until the hallway fell quiet. She must have gone downstairs or back to her car. That's when I stood up, grabbed the USB stick I'd hidden under the cutlery tray, and slipped it into my jacket pocket. She thought I didn't know. But I knew. Not everything. Not at first. But enough. 2 weeks earlier, I'd noticed her laptop left open on the kitchen island. Something she never did. Maybe it was a mistake. Or maybe she wanted to be caught and didn't have the courage to say it out loud. In any case, I saw a message. It wasn't the words that shattered me. It was the tone. Playful. Excited. Desperate. She never texted me that way. Hadn't in years. "I wish you were here right now. Last night wasn't enough." He doesn't suspect anything. He never does. I copied the whole thread, every photo, every timestamp onto a USB. I didn't confront her. I didn't scream or cry. I did the one thing she never expected. I waited. And tonight, that text, "I have my own life." That was my green light. At midnight, I left. Quietly. No keys. No note. I even took the trash out on the way. Pathetic, I know. Still trying to be decent. I drove to my friend Emery's place. He's the one guy I never introduced her to. Not because I didn't want to, but because I knew she'd ruin him too. When I walked into his apartment, he barely said anything. Just handed me a beer, nodded, and let me sit with the kind of silence that doesn't ask questions. At 12:37 a.m., she started calling again. Then again. And again. By 1:05 a.m., my phone showed 22 missed calls. Then she sent me a video. She was in our bedroom, sobbing, saying she didn't mean it, saying it was just stress, that I was taking it the wrong way. No apology, no truth, just panic. And that's when it hit me. She wasn't scared of losing me. She was scared of losing the version of me who didn't know what she was doing. Because now I knew everything. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I couldn't, but because I didn't want to. Something inside me had shifted, snapped, maybe. For years I was the guy who waited up, who forgave quickly, who rationalized everything so she wouldn't feel guilty. But sitting on Emery's couch, phone face down, her calls rolling in every 10 minutes, I didn't feel guilt anymore. I felt disgust. Not just toward her, toward myself. I'd been living with a stranger. No worse. I've been loving one. Around 3 a.m., she finally stopped calling. The silence that followed was heavier than all the messages she could have sent. I imagined her back at the apartment, probably pacing, probably angry, maybe scared, but not of losing me. No. She was scared of losing her safety net, her audience, her blind spot. That was all I'd ever been to her. When morning came, I still hadn't told Emery the full story. He didn't press. We just sat, sipping burnt coffee in that cramped kitchen of his while the city outside yawned into life. I opened my email, drafted something cold, clean. I attached the screenshots, the hotel receipts she forgot to delete, the photos he'd sent her, the message that started it all. But I didn't send it to her. I sent it to her sister, Lena. She deserved to know the truth. Not just because she was family, but because she was the only one who ever pulled me aside at family gatherings and said things like, "Are you okay?" Or, "You seem tired, Alden." She knew something was wrong before I did. By noon, Lena replied with 3 words. Oh my God. That's when things truly began to unravel. Fast. At 12:41 p.m., my wife, no, I won't say her name here, texted again. This time it was a different tone. We need to talk. Please. Can I come to Emery's? I know you're there. Lena told me what you did. Are you trying to destroy me? Destroy her? I laughed out loud, genuinely laughed, and Emery looked at me like I was losing my mind. Maybe I was. But I wasn't the one who burned everything down and then cried when the smoke alarms went off. She called again. This time I answered. Why are you doing this? She asked, voice trembling, but still wearing that edge. That tone she used when she thought she had the upper hand. You're being vindictive. I said nothing for a long moment. Then I finally replied, calmly, quietly. You made me invisible for 2 years. I'm just making sure people finally see me. Click. I hung up. And for the first time in a long, long time I felt alive. But that feeling didn't last, because 20 minutes later, my phone lit up with a notification from my bank. A withdrawal. A big one. She was already moving against me. And I realized this wasn't over. Not even close. I never thought I'd feel violated without anyone touching me. But watching that bank notification pop up on my screen, $3, 800 gone in a single transfer, hit harder than any slap ever could. It wasn't just the money. It was the message. She was saying, you walked away, but I'm still in control. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. It wasn't from our joint account. She had withdrawn it from my personal savings. An account she wasn't even supposed to access. But months ago, back when I still believed she was my partner, I'd helped her recover the login info during some forgotten password crisis. I even remember joking, what's mine is yours. Now I wished I'd choked on those words. I immediately called the bank. Fraud alert. Lock the account. Submit a report. The guy on the phone sounded half asleep, like this was just another Tuesday to him. I wanted to scream, my wife stole from me. But all I said was, I need to freeze everything she can touch. By the time I hung up, Emery had already made breakfast. If you could call toast and 2 sad eggs breakfast. He asked what happened. I told him. This time I didn't hold anything back. When I finished, he sat there for a moment, then said something I'll never forget. You've been playing chess with someone who never played fair. So stop playing fair. It hit me like a brick. I'd spent years believing in boundaries she never respected. In honesty she didn't value. In a marriage she'd already quit on. Long before I opened her laptop, long before I replied to that text, long before the yoga nights turned into motel nights, I grabbed my laptop and opened the shared cloud drive we barely used anymore. She must have forgotten it was synced. Photos, PDFs, screenshots. I started digging. It wasn't just one guy. It was 3. Different names. Different cities. One of them even bought her concert tickets last spring when she told me she was at a work conference. That weekend I had the flu and she didn't want to get sick, so she stayed in a hotel for 2 nights. I slept alone, sweating through my sheets, thinking she was protecting me. She was backstage with someone else's arm around her. I copied everything, every file, every timestamp, every lie. Then I opened a new document and started writing a timeline. Every instance, every night, every excuse I now saw for what it really was. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet, but I knew one thing. This wasn't revenge. It was documentation. Because when people like her start spinning stories, asterisk, he was crazy, he abandoned me, he made it up, you need receipts, and I was building a library. But I underestimated how fast she'd escalate. Because less than 2 hours later, I got an email from HR. From my job. Subject line, formal complaint filed. She had just made her next move. And this time, she wasn't playing alone. When you receive an email from your company's HR department with the subject line, formal complaint filed, your first instinct is panic. Your second is confusion. Your third, if you're like me, is denial. Surely it's a mistake. Surely it's not her. But it was. I clicked the message with shaking hands, my stomach doing things no horror film ever managed to trigger. The first sentence was all it took. We've received an anonymous report alleging emotional instability and inappropriate conduct affecting your performance in the workplace. Anonymous. I almost laughed, like she thought hiding behind anonymous would somehow mask the way she typed. I've read enough of her emails to recognize the rhythm, the phrasing. It was her. Without a doubt. I wasn't even angry at first. Just hollow. Numb. It wasn't enough for her to ruin our marriage. Now she wanted to smear me where it hurt most. My job, my last place of dignity. The only thing I hadn't surrendered during those years of bending over backwards to keep her happy. I responded professionally. Of course I did. Scheduled a call. Offered documentation. Explained the situation in neutral terms. But inside, I was boiling. This wasn't a divorce anymore. It was war, and I still didn't understand why. What was she trying to protect, or cover up, or distract from? I decided to dig deeper. I reached out to Lena again. This time, I asked her something that had been festering in my mind for days. Did she ever say anything about me? Before all this? Lena didn't reply with words. She sent me a screenshot. A group chat. 5 women. My wife included. Months ago, they were talking about me like I was a child. Or worse, like I was a prop in their sitcom. He's so emotionally dependent. I swear, if I ever cheated, he'd probably blame himself. He doesn't even ask questions anymore. It's almost sad. It was sad. Because they were right. I didn't ask questions. I assumed love was enough. I believed if I just held on long enough, she'd come back to me. The woman I married. The one who used to look at me like I was worth something. But she wasn't coming back. Because that woman, she never existed. By the time the HR call ended the next day, I'd cleared myself. No marks. No suspensions. They thanked me for my transparency. But something in the voice of the woman on the call told me she didn't believe a word of what had been written about me in that complaint anyway. She probably had her own stories. Still, it left a mark. Not professionally, emotionally, because now I knew there were no limits anymore. She wasn't afraid to lie, to manipulate, to weaponize sympathy. And if she was willing to do that to me, what else was she willing to do? That night I moved again. Didn't tell her where. Didn't post anything online. I used a burner number for work. Bought a second phone, just to keep track of the messages she kept sending. Increasingly frantic, unpredictable, unstable. One of them just said, "If you ruin me, I swear I'll take everything with me." That's when I realized. She wasn't spiraling. She was preparing for impact. 3 days passed without a single word from me, and it drove her insane. The silence wasn't just power, it was exposure. Without me to gaslight, manipulate, or emotionally leash back into the cycle, she had no script to follow. She couldn't play the victim if I refused to be in the scene. That's when the voicemails started. Long, unhinged, contradictory. In one, she was crying, begging me to come home, promising she'd explain everything face to face. In the next, she was screaming, accusing me of abandoning her, of ruining her reputation, of turning her own sister against her. Then came the message that made me freeze mid-step. You think this is about cheating? You have no idea what's really going on. It was the way she said it, calm, calculated, almost smug, like she was holding a card I didn't know she had. For a moment, I doubted myself. What if there was something more? Something I missed? A game being played at a level I hadn't even noticed? That night, I opened my laptop and went back through everything. Every bank record, every synced cloud file, every scrap of metadata. And that's when I found something I hadn't seen before. A recurring payment. $1,700 every 2 weeks. Labeled as consulting. Transferred to a name I didn't recognize. At first I thought it was just another affair. Maybe someone she was paying off. But when I searched the name, what I found wasn't another man. It was a woman. A licensed attorney. And suddenly the timeline made sense. Months before the text. Before the hotel stays. Before the emotional fallout. She had already hired a divorce lawyer. She'd been planning this long before I discovered anything. Long before I walked out. Long before I answered back with that single message. This wasn't a spiral. This was a setup. And I had just stepped into her trap. For a long time I just sat there, staring at the attorney's website. Professional headshot. Ivy League resume. Specializes in high-conflict divorce and asset shielding. The kind of lawyer you hire when you're not just leaving someone, you're planning to gut them on the way out. And she'd been paying her for at least 3 months. Probably longer. That's when the full weight of it hit me. She never panicked because I left. She panicked because I left too soon. I wasn't supposed to leave first. I wasn't supposed to find the files, or make a clean exit, or cut off the narrative she'd been rehearsing for months. I was supposed to unravel slowly, emotionally, while she positioned herself as the calm, reasonable one. The victim. The wife with a sad, unstable husband. But I walked out, quietly, with evidence. And that ruined everything. Now I understood the HR complaint. The financial hit. The smear campaign. She was scrambling to reconstruct the story she had planned to control. Except now, I had leverage. I wasn't just surviving, I was watching her strategy collapse in real time. Still, I didn't want revenge. Not really. I wanted my life back. My name. My peace. But in order to get that, I had to play her game just long enough to end it. So I made a move of my own. I scheduled a meeting with her lawyer. No warnings. No heads up. I didn't even tell Lena. I showed up dressed plainly, no emotion on my face. The receptionist looked confused. I gave her my name. 5 minutes later, I was sitting in a glass office across from a woman with a clipboard and a cautious smile. I told her everything. The fake yoga nights. The messages. The secret withdrawals. The staged breakdowns. The anonymous HR complaint. I even offered to provide every document in chronological order, clean, time-stamped, backed up in multiple places. No speculation, just facts. She sat quietly, nodding, scribbling notes. Then she asked, "And why are you telling me all this?" I looked her dead in the eyes and said, "Because your client didn't tell you the truth. And if this goes public, your name will be on it too." That got her attention. I didn't threaten. I didn't blackmail. I just gave her a choice. Represent someone spiraling into self-destruction, or walk away clean. She didn't respond right then. But when I left, I could feel the shift in the air. And that night, my wife called again. I didn't answer. Instead, I listened to her voicemail 3 times. She was quiet, soft-spoken, almost empty. Then, in a trembling voice, she said something I'll never forget. "You weren't supposed to beat me to it." She hung up, and I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to consider until that moment. This wasn't the end. This was the part where she got dangerous. I didn't hear from her for 5 days after that voicemail. No texts, no emails, not a single call. It was the longest silence we'd had since this entire thing exploded, and it was, strangely, the most peaceful 5 days I'd had in years. I spent the time moving my accounts, securing my credit, finalizing legal filings, and getting therapy. Not for her, not even because of her, but for me, because I'd finally admitted something that took me years to face. I had built a life around someone who never truly saw me. and I'd shrunk myself to fit her version of what a safe man looked like. Quiet, compliant, emotionally convenient. But I'm not that man anymore. On the 6th day, her sister texted me. Just a simple message. She dropped the lawyer. She's not contesting anything. That was it. No court battle. No drawn-out war. Just silence. I don't know if it was guilt, fear, shame, or just the fact that her story had crumbled before she could control it. But whatever the reason, she let go. And I was free. I took a week off work. I flew to Portland alone and just walked. For miles. No destination. No noise. Just breathing, moving, watching the world exist without her in it. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't victory. It was peace. I didn't get back what I lost. But I got something better. A version of myself that doesn't live in someone else's shadow anymore. And for the first time in my adult life, I'm not afraid of being alone. Because I'm not alone. There are people like you watching, reading, listening who've been through your own versions of this. Who've rebuilt from scratch. Who know the ache of silence and the relief of finally choosing yourself. So now, I want to ask you, have you ever walked away from something that was destroying you quietly? What was your breaking point? What did freedom look like for you? Let me know down in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story hit home, or helped you see something clearly, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. You're watching Reddit Confessions, where the truth always finds a voice.